YouTube, hello, welcome back to Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. We're going to be going over Aerith today, and Aerith is going to be one of the more complex ones that we've done, just simply because of just the volume of weapons that she has available, the difference between her featured and her limited pools, the amount of flexibility that the healers have. And this is going to be the start of the series where we start to run into a lot of variants or variables, as we saw with Glenn as an example, where Glenn has a lot of instances where like it kind of depends on the stage, right? Unlike our damage dealers, which can be pretty easy, pretty cut and dry, right? You kind of have the exact build and you know what you're looking for and the optimal ideal build for those characters. And like obviously with everything in Ever Crisis, you can always adjust based on your current overboost levels, based on your current weapons that you have available. Those things all still maintain or remain, right? But with the healers and the supports in this game, it's really going to come down to what you need for each stage, right? So although I'm going to give you some like basic ideas here today, most of the things that we're going to discuss will have some nuance to it. There's going to be some alternatives that you can go over, and I'm going to try to do my best to go over that. And as a result, this video might be a little longer, which is, you know, to be expected. But we're also going to be doing videos for Matt and Lucia, who I know I'm behind on those two character guides, and we're also behind on an Angeal guide as well. So if you're interested in checking those out, make sure you subscribe so that way you get notified when they're up here on YouTube. First and foremost, we're going to start with the easy one, which is just the healer build. So this is going to be Aerith's bread and butter. For folks that started during second anniversary, you've got the Fairy Tail weapon available. Fairy Tail is a decent healing weapon that is just focused, prioritized on healing. It's got a good heal stat for the R ability, not great, but good. Got a good heal stat in terms of its actual weapon stat, the heal ability, right, which is good. And a 74% heal for your entire team is very solid for 5 ATB. You'll notice that when we get into the limited weapons, that heal number comes down for exchange of like some buffs, debuffs, etc. There will be stages where that 74% heal will be necessary, but you'll find that that's few and far between in today's game. Now, as we continue to see more power creep come into the game and we continue to see more difficult content, you know, you'll find that that 74% might actually be helpful in those stages. But it is worth noting that it is a massive heal, but it does come with no additional buffs, no additional debuffs, and that can be kind of a hamper in today's metagame or in today's standard gameplay, right? Earth resistance is obviously great for the stages where you're facing earth damage, so stuff like a Titan, as an example. This could be a very good sub-weapon for your healer. This could also be a very good main hand weapon for Aerith, who has the ability to lower wind resist, which we'll get to in a few minutes. In terms of her offhand weapon, this is where things can get a little varied. It's really going to depend on what you need for that specific encounter. I put on the Rousing Wiser Staff, which is a weapon that we all got for free, and a weapon that we'll all be able to get to OB10 over time once we get these new featured weapons that are in the pool to, I believe it's OB2. You'll get a couple of, I think it's 100 of those little, I forget what they're called. There's some kind of gems or crystals, some exchange shop stuff, right? And you'll be able to get extra copies of this, which means you'll be able to get this to OB10 naturally over the course of time, which is awesome. The reason why this is good is because it gives your entire team a physical attack and magic defense increase while having really great supportive R abilities. Boost HP is obviously great for any defensive or healer, right? To make sure that they stay up. Buff debuff extension, make sure that your buffs stay on longer. It's got really good materia slots as well. And this makes for a very good offhand weapon for your physical squads. When it comes to giving her a weapon in her featured pool that's specifically focused on just supporting your team, the one that is the easiest one to recommend is just Sun Umbrella. It's a physical defense and magic defense decrease with some offensive R abilities. This was a staple for Aerith early in the game. Sun Umbrella was one of the first banners after the initial Murasame banner to release, and Sun Umbrella has been a staple for Aerith from the beginning of the game. Now, we obviously have seen physical defense and magic defense debuffs that have gone beyond -2, but the fact that this is 4 ATB, lowers both of those resists down, is still solid, and solid enough to have in your offhand for your healer build. When you don't want to heal, you'll have a debuff at least. For her limit breaks, this is where things are going to get a little bit more varied as well. There are two limit breaks that Aerith primarily uses. Her primary one is the Healing Wind. This is the first one that she gets. This is a massive heal. You can see 99% of healing potency to all allies, plus a 9-second regen, which means you're going to get a little bit of extra healing on top of it for an 1800 charge speed. This is a massive heal, and generally more than you're going to need outside of Aerith herself casting her healing spells, right? This is still a solid heal. It's still very, very good. There's no reason not to level this one up. The one that most folks use and the ones you've probably seen people use is Breath of the Earth. The reason why is because it's a 94% heal. You'll notice it's only 5% off of Healing Wind for 600 less charge speed, meaning that she charges it faster, and it removes physical and magic defense down on all allies. This is crucial for things like, even as of right now during this recording, the lightning escalation battles going on from the Final Fantasy 13 crossover event, and lightning consistently lowers physical defense as she's attacking, which is very, very difficult to deal with. Breath of the Earth says nope and resets that back to 0, allowing you then to reapply your physical defense buffs, making it so that lightning has to continue to lower down that physical defense down. It's a great option for removing debuffs from your team, and the regen for Breath of the Earth is actually longer than Healing Wind. So Breath of the Earth is just the better option in terms of her limit break abilities. So this is the one you're going to see on most of her builds. We'll talk about the ones where we deviate outside of that. In terms of materia slots, I usually just focus on heal stat here. So these are mostly my heal stat stick materias, and if I have it available, I try to get some defensive stats in there as well. When it comes to Aerith and any healer in this game, you typically don't need to focus in on heal. You usually get enough heal stat from the weapons that you're actually bringing into the fight, or from some sub weapons, which we'll go over once we get into some of the sub weapon builds for some of these builds. You typically don't need to bring in heal with materia stat sticks often, if at all, in most of the content in the game. Some of the content that you might see that in would be the high-level escalation challenges, some of the high-level event challenges like crash battles. Sometimes that heal potency can really make or break your attempts, so that's part of it as well. So not useless by any stretch, but usually I like to put defensive stat sticks on my healers to make sure that they're staying upright, because I'd rather them casting than having to, like, you know, fall down, right? So still important. Obviously, heal is still very important, but defensive stats are very important for your healer as well. In terms of sub weapons, the sub weapons for most of your healers are going to be supportive effects. So what you see here is I've got physical attack all allies, and magic defense all allies. The one thing that I think is probably going to stay the same is you're always going to have a stat stick that's a magic or physical attack all allies weapon. You're always going to have a weapon that is physical or magic defense all allies, and then this last slot is kind of a flexible slot, right? You're going to be giving a slot on here where you can either do attack all allies because you need a little bit more damage. You can include a separate physical or magic defense all allies. Maybe you need both, like in the case of, again, the lightning escalation challenge where it does physical and magic damage. Maybe you need both defense all allies, so you can throw that on there as well. Or if you wanted to try to max out your magic attack all allies or physical attack all allies, you could throw a second weapon on here to try to max things out. It's a little bit more flexible. There's usually not a lot of like selfish sub weapons that I would say would go onto your healers. That can change, obviously, based on the stage, and that's where I said a lot of nuance is going to come into some of these like builds. Don't take what I show you on screen here as like the efficient way to build a healer or build a support, because at the end of the day, these are going to widely vary based on your party's needs. And that's the real good part about the healer classes, meaning Matt, Aerith, and Red 13, is that they will have the most flexible sub-weapon slots in the game versus all of your DPS characters, versus even some of the support characters in the game. These sub-weapons will be very flexible based on whatever you need for that stage. So that's pretty much the healer in terms of the featured weapons she has available. We're going to move on to her magic ice support. So her magic ice support is really good. Even in the featured pool, this is a very solid, helpful build because of Citric Wand. Citric Wand is a feature weapon that increases one ally's magic attack from mid to high, and it also increases their ice damage high to high, meaning after one cast, you're getting +3 ice DPS onto your individual unit. And if you have any type of other buffs to help buff up that damage, that mid to high magic attack is not as crucial, especially because it only costs 3 ATB to get this attack off. Coupled with another 52 points of buff debuff extension, meaning that in the main hand, you're getting 180% effect duration. That means that that ice damage buff is going to be on there for a very long time, and you're not going to have to recast it very often, which is awesome. You couple and pair this with something like Snowflake, which has ice magic damage and lowers magic defense as you're attacking. It means that if you're not casting with your Citric Wand, you're able to do a little bit of ice damage while also maintaining a magic defense debuff on the opponent, making it very helpful for those ice weak stages, especially if you're trying to, you know, sneak out a little bit of extra damage. These two weapons combined actually get her up to that level 6, 7, or 7 break for the magic attack stat, which is awesome. You can see under my sub weapons here, I have no extra magic attack. It's just these two that got that magic attack stat up to level 7. And I was still able to then have supportive sub weapons that would help my team versus focusing in on trying to make Aerith do damage. So her magic attack stat is still 12,000 here, and this is, again, in a co-op party. So this is without any additional magic attack all allies effects, any additional attack all allies effects, any kind of other support at all. And she's still able to get to a really high damage number without an outfit, and with, I think these aren't even magic attack focused. Yeah, 5%. I think this one's 9%. I gave her an ice potency materia, and then this one's only 5%. So these, that was actually my heal stat stick at the bottom there. So the one downside for this is that if you are using her as an ice support in this, if you do need a cure all slot, you can switch Snowflake in to the main slot, and you can use this as a cure all instead, which is good. But obviously that makes it so that the our abilities aren't quite as efficient. You're still going to get that level 7 break, but your buff debuff extension is going to drop as a result, because having this in the offhand, remember, gives you half of those R abilities, right? So instead of 52 points, you'd be getting 26, and then that would be a drop of 26 points from this 62, bringing you all the way down to 36 points, which takes you from a level 7 to a level 5, and that's a 50% decrease in buff debuff extension. Now, does that matter at the end of the day? Not really, right? It's still it's obviously less, and it's going to last less long, but then that you trade that off with having a cure all slot, right? So it's still pretty important. If you do need that cure all slot, you just flip these two around, move your cure materia down to the bottom slot so you get that materia boost, and that'd be good to go. In terms of the limit break here, I do have on the new enemy ability. This ability is very, very good. This is an ability that with a 500 charge speed, which is the fastest charge speed limit break in the game, it does 1,000 damage, which is solid, but it also increases your entire team's physical and magic attack from low to extra high, which is +4. The reason why this is really, really good is because it has a 40-second duration, and you are absolutely going to get that charge speed up to 500 before that buff ever drops, right? So you're going to be able to slowly increase your team's physical and magic attack with this, meaning that you can continue to reapply the magic attack buff that Citric Wand gives, while also getting it to a +4 tier, which is another 10% damage increase, which is very good. 1,000 damage is pretty solid, especially for a 500 charge speed attack, and this is a solid limit break for your supports and your healers when you don't need a heal. Obviously, if you do need the heal, if you're finding yourself getting debuffed a lot, just switch this over to Breath of the Earth. Sub weapons exactly the same, just magic attack all allies, and then obviously attack all allies. I did focus in on just magic attack all allies here, so that way Aerith could do a little bit more damage. That got her up to the level 5 break, and the Protector's Blade gave her a little bit of magic ability potency, giving her a little bit of extra damage. It's an extra 30% damage. It's solid. It's pretty good. Obviously, her goal here is not to deal damage. It is to help your team deal damage, but it gives you the things that you're looking for, right? Magic attack buffs, magic defense debuffs, ice damage, so you can help do the ice damage. And the only thing you're really missing then is ice resist down. But if you have something like Tifa's new lightning gloves, you're able to inflict that ice resist down while still dealing damage. So it's a solid build, really still pretty good in today's game. We're moving on to one of her DPS builds, one of her two very rare DPS builds, and it is her Magic Wind build. Her Magic Wind weapon is Prism Rod. It does an 800% Magic Wind attack with defensive boost HP R ability, but still comes with wind potency. And then if you pair this with the Floral Wand, which is a more physical focused weapon, but does have a high wind resist down and split R ability boost attack with wind potency, that's going to get you up to a level 7 or a level 8 break. No, it's level 7. Level 7 break with the wind potency, which is really, really good. Pair this with some wind potency materials and the Zantetsuken limit break from Odin. And then the sub weapons, you would just give her offensive sub weapons, right? We're looking for magic attack because neither one of her weapons have magic attack. So I gave her Electro Cannon, which is one of the weapons that we got for free just for logging in. This gives magic attack and magic ability potency, both of which are very, very helpful. I also paired this over with the Holiday Bell, which gives a large magic attack buff and wind potency. Those two weapons combined actually got her to the level 7 break for magic attack. So I just slotted in Vincent's Sawed-Off GS, which gives attack and magic ability potency, which got her up to that level 6 break. This is obviously a very, very strong build overall. The only real downsides with Aerith doing damage in today's game is that Aerith's overspeed roll is not built for her to do damage. So she will obviously never do as much magic damage as someone like, you know, Yuffie or Cloud or Sephiroth or, you know, etc., right? Insert name here. Any of the other offensive characters that have attacker roles will do more damage with those elemental potencies than any of the supports or the healers or the tanks will in this game, right? It doesn't mean it's a bad build. It's still solid. It can still dish out some decent magic wind damage. So don't sleep on this one. It's still available. It's still optional. It's available to use, obviously, because both of these are featured weapons. So you're able to get it done. It's still a solid build, and it's something you can use with Aerith if you'd like to. Then we're going to go into her Magic Fire build. Her Magic Fire build has largely been power crept at this point. She does a solid AoE Magic Fire damage attack, and then against a single target, it gets a 30% boost with, again, a defensive R ability, but then fire potency. This one is solid, and unlike Prism Rod, this one actually has a Cure All Materia slot, allowing you to still allow Aerith to be a healer in this fight, making it very, very helpful to have this as a optional additional fire damage when you need it, right? In terms of AoE damage, the AoE damage from Helical Flame, 630% to the entire enemy team is solid. I think the highest that we've seen for AoE elemental damage has been somewhere in the 800 to 900 range. I think that was the Dragon Quest weapon for Sephiroth as the highest that we've seen. And most of the featured weapons have not gone above 780 to 800%. I think the Dragoon Lance is currently the highest at 804 with its a 20% buff that it gets. Overall, this is still solid fire damage, and against a single target, it does get a bit of a buff. So that way, if you do take out the adds on the side, this will at least still do some solid damage as a single target attack. Obviously, this is not a massively high damage attack. It's still solid though, and if you need Aerith to help support with some fire damage, she's able to do so. Since it's not very strong, and there are other options in the game that are a lot stronger than Egg Staff, I do have her equipped with the Crimson Flare. That would just increase your entire team's fire damage. I have her with some fire potency materias here. And then for the offhand weapon, this is where things get a little interesting with Aerith, because this is another one where the offhand weapon is kind of subjective, right? I currently have her with the Sun Umbrella just because it gives magic attack and magic ability potency, two things that she really would like, but there are a ton of limited options here that you could add into this to increase the power level, right? You could give her the Terror Rod from Final Fantasy VI and have her have an AoE fire resist down, which paired with her AoE fire weapon is very solid, right? That's a great option. You can get her the Supreme Sage's Staff, which gives your entire team exploit weakness, which is a 20% exploit weakness. This is also very solid. So there are a lot of really good options in her kit that you can just kind of slot in here when needed. I don't have to explain how great Crimson Staff is, but we will get into that once we get into the limited options. But there are a lot of great options here in terms of her offhand weapons that you can slot in here. I threw in Sun Umbrella because it's the most generic good magic attack offhand weapon for Aerith at this point. Sub weapons are just going to be magic attack all allies and fire potency. I've got the Shiranui, from Sephiroth's banner. I've got attack all allies and buff debuff extension to help make sure that we get that extra debuff on there for longer. And then I threw on Rose Musket for some magic ability potency and fire potency. This is a really good combination for Aerith, who can use both of those stats pretty well. And it gets her up to the level 8 break for fire potency and the level 5 break for magic ability potency, which is solid, right? Solid stuff. Is it really good? Not really, right? The damage is okay, the build is okay, but obviously there are better magic fire damage dealers in the game. She is able to do some decent fire damage here, and the magic attack is a little bit carried by the fact that I have this outfit on. This gives a 10 magic attack, so she would be at the level 3 break if I didn't have that. So you can actually decrease this by about 5% when I don't have it on, right? But like overall, it's still solid. Again, if you needed some extra fire damage, she can still fill the role, and she can still heal while filling the role, which is solid. Her last featured banner stuff that we're going to go over today is her physical electric support. This is going to be revolving around the Mermaid Rod, and for folks that missed my banner review video on this one, this weapon is not very good until OB10. When you have it at OB10, this weapon becomes amazing. This is a very strong weapon at OB10. But when you get it up to OB6, you can only go mid to mid with the physical attack. The lightning damage does go mid to high at that point, which is great. But having this be mid to mid with a heal and buff debuff extension is just okay, right? If this had a heal all slot, it would be significantly better than it is today. But because it doesn't, and it is a more offensively focused weapon, even though it does not do damage, it is less useful as a result, right? So if you get this up to OB10, that's when you start to see that mid to high increase, and then your lightning damage obviously again just stays mid to high. you're still stuck with the same stuff here, but boost heal 62 is great. Buff debuff extension 42 is great. And having an AoE physical attack increase with lightning damage bonus is very, very good, especially because lightning tends to be one of the more, I don't want to say neglected, but one of the more limited options in the game when it comes to options for damage for lightning damage. So food for thought, it's still very strong. It still helps your physical lightning builds, but you do need to have this at OB6 plus minimally to see the real benefit from this. And if you really want to see a good use from it, it has to be OB10, right? Thankfully, with featured weapons, eventually it will be OB10, which is good. But until you get it to that point and it gets to that OB10 level, it's not very useful up until that point. In terms of the offhand weapon, this is really going to come down to what you're looking for. I would assume you're looking for a physical defense debuff, so I threw on the Floral Wand just because it has a physical defense debuff with 3 ATB, gives her a little bit more attack, so just something to help increase her damage a little bit. Sub weapons are just going to be physical and attack all allies to help increase your physical DPS's damage. Pretty easy there, right? Nothing crazy. Again, just a reminder again, Mermaid Rod has to be at a high overboost level for this to even be something you consider for your lightning based teams. And that pretty much covers the featured side. Aerith is one of the it's debatable at the end of the day, but I would argue that Aerith is one of the weaker featured healers in the game. I think Matt and Red 13's kits both lend themselves a lot better for your overall construction, like roster construction. Red 13 has a lot of imperil effects, and Matt has a lot of debuff effects that are very, very helpful. Not to mention the fact that Matt actually just got a really good weapon in Desperado Rapier, I think is the name of it, where it's a physical attack increase and a resist up, which is the first time we've seen a resist up. So he's got a lot of flexibility in his featured pool, where Aerith kind of has like, I would say 2 roles and potentially 3 that you're probably excited about. The 2 roles that you're excited about, the Magic Ice Support and the healer roles. And the one that could be good is once you get Mermaid Rod to OB10, the physical support would also be really good. Obviously, for that, if you're looking for just physical support, you could also use that Wizened Rod that we were talking about with the healer build, right? That increases your entire team's physical attack and magic defense. This would also still work, right? The Rousing Wiser Staff, that's an option as well. But yeah, these are basically her only really good featured options. Again, take all of this with a grain of salt because this is going to come down to what your party needs. And Aerith does have some options in her featured pool that you can utilize in certain fights, but I would argue that those are largely niche and not happening very often, which is why I just showed you these 5. Getting into some of the limited ones, we're going to start with the limited healing. Limited healing, this is going to be basically centered around 2 different weapons. You've got the Bahamut Rod, which is the bread and butter for Aerith ever since first anniversary. It's an AoE heal with a physical defense increase of +2. And then if she's less than 70% HP, you're getting +1 ATB to your allies. This actually goes up at OB10 to a full 90% HP. So as long as Aerith has taken 10% of her max HP, when she uses this weapon, will give your team +1 ATB. This helps accelerate some of the damage that you're dealing or reapplying buffs, reapplying debuffs, etc. It also comes with an offensive R ability that helps support your magic attack builds, while also still having a boost heal R ability, meaning that she's helping increase her own healing effectiveness, which is awesome. The sigil abilities, these secondary abilities that we get for our materials, these are all amazing. Magic attack boost just helps that one slot that we put in for magic attack, so Rune Ruz, right? Debuffs like Defaith and Debrave, etc. Heal boost slot, if you need a single target heal that's stronger than a 59%, you can throw a 5-star materia here and get a really strong individual heal up to 120% with a 5-star cure. And then we have an all Asuna slot, and this is one of, I believe, only 2 or 3, I think it's 3 weapons now that have an Asuna all slot. This is crucial for certain stages like Shiva and a couple of others that do AoE status ailments, right? Things like darkness, silence, etc. The reason why this is so good is because normally Asuna has to be cast 3 times, which costs 9 ATB to heal it from all of your allies. This allows you to throw that Asuna slot into Asuna materia into this Asuna slot, and then for just 3 ATB, you can remove that status ailment from your entire team. This is incredibly strong, incredibly useful, and something that you absolutely should value if you have not already gotten the Bahamut Rod. In terms of the other option is called Gombantane. This was the Rebirth event limited weapon that Aerith got available. This is also a 59% AoE heal with a physical attack increase instead of a physical defense increase. So this is more offensively focused while still having a +1 ATB for the same exact spots, right? 50, 70, and 90% AoB 10. Does come with heal and buff debuff extension, which is really, really good for making sure that that buff stays on, right? We do like when the buff stays on for longer. It also has a heal boost slot for the same reason that Bahamut Rod does, but instead of the Asuna All slot, this came with a more offensively focused Sigil boost slot, which is a nice alternative to the Asuna slot when you don't need it, right? And obviously when you don't need the physical defense increase, this is also nice to have for a separate physical attack buffing option, right? Still a solid weapon. I'll be honest with you, it's largely because I have not gotten this to a high enough overboost for me to care that I have not used Gambantane very often, but I have not seen a use case often where Gambantane has been the preferred option over Bahamut Rod, right? I prefer to have that defensive buff in most of the case, right? And she has so many options to increase physical attack outside of this weapon that I typically don't use this. That's not to say it is useless. I'm sure it has its use cases, but it is the less used option for me personally. In terms of the offhand weapon, it's really going to come down to what you're building out the Aerith's healing roll for. If you're looking for a physical attack increase, you're going to be using either Kimura Wand or the Rousing Wiser Staff, whichever one you have available. They increase the physical attack and magic defense of your entire team with having really good R abilities and solid materia slots when you need those materia slots. If you're looking for magic, you're going to be looking at Crimson Staff. Crimson Staff is incredibly useful, even at OB0, where it's able to do a full -2 to the entire enemy team's magic defense while giving a +2 magic attack buff to your entire team. At OB6 is when you really see that increase come to life, where it goes like directly to high. You do not have to cast this twice. It's just an immediate +3 magic attack to your entire team and an immediate -3 magic defense to the entire enemy team. This weapon remains one of the strongest buff debuff weapons in the game, and it's one of the reasons why Aerith is so sought after in magic-based teams and why people are so excited about her recent banner, which we're going to get into that later in the video. Magic attack and buff debuff extension is great. It also has a cure materia slot if you needed this, usually with the healer build you're using Bahamut Rod and Gambantane as a healer, or even the Fairy Tail on the stages that you really need that extra oomph for your AoE heal. But like I said, it's really going to come down to whichever one you need. In terms of materia slots, it's just going to come down to if you need magic defense, physical defense, whatever you're looking for, right? You would just put whatever one you need. And Breath of the Earth is going to be the bread and butter limit break. And then for the sub weapons, again, I didn't put any on here because this is really going to depend on what you're trying to build out for. If you got a physical based team, you're going to get physical attack all allies. If it's a magic based team, magic attack all allies, right? Whatever you need, then the defensive R abilities that you need, and you just kind of throw it in there. So overall, this is what most people look at and see like Aerith's a really good character. This has been the reason why Aerith has been so strong for the last year plus, is between the Bahamut Rod and the Crimson Staff, which we'll talk more about the Crimson Staff and the Kimura one later in the video. Overall, though, this is still really strong. She's a solid healer. Obviously, Matt and Red 13 both have gotten really good options, so now they are also very good healers. And I think that most of the stages that you're bringing in a healer, it's really going to depend on what you need. It's going to depend on what healer you bring. I think all three of them do a great job, but this is still a really solid build, and Bahamut Rod remains one of the best weapons in the game. Next up, we've got MATK Support. This is where we're going to get into a little bit more of the weeds here. We're going to be talking about the Crimson Staff, we're going to be talking about the Supreme Sage's Staff, and we're going to be talking about her recently released Lightning's Rod. And the reason why I wanted to go over this is because there's been a lot of discussion around the most recent banner and my opinion on that banner, and why I view Lightning's Staff the way that I do. And I think this is a great opportunity for me to actually touch base on kind of why I feel the way that I do about Lightning Staff in particular, or Lightning's Rod rather in particular. First and foremost, though, we're going to go over what I think is a pretty solid build for this. Obviously, Crimson Staff is the bread and butter for this. We already went over this just a couple of minutes ago, where with this is a magic attack all allies effect, magic defense down all enemies. Very, very good. Staple for all magic teams. Solid. The Supreme Sage's Staff gives your entire team exploit weakness, which is really, really good. Obviously, we do have some other instances of that across the board. When it comes to the exploit weakness options, we do have things like Red 13's ultimate weapon. We've got Yuffie's Rocker's Guitar is another great option for exploit weakness. But if you don't have those two characters on your team, or if you don't have those two options at a decent overboost level, a 20% increase to your entire team, you could do worse, right? You could do worse, and these are good supportive R abilities to have in the offhand. In terms of sub-weapons, again, this is just going to be magic attack and attack all allies focus, just to increase your entire team's damage. This is still a solid build, and the only things that you're going to be switching over this sub-weapon to, this offhanded weapon to, if you don't need exploit weakness, but you need some resist downs, you can look at Terra's Rod for fire, ice, and lightning resist down. And then if you're looking for just more oomph and you want to increase your damage a bit more, that's when you start to look at things like Lightning's Rod, which increases your team's ability to do magic damage. There are obviously a ton of other options here that can also increase your total team's DPS. It's really going to come down to, again, what you're looking for. If you needed like a heal, as an example, you could throw Fairy Tail in the offhand. There are options to have here. She even has a summon weapon that has a water resist decrease, and an OB10 is a mid-level water decrease with magic defense and lightning resist down. This is actually a pretty useful weapon against something like Ramuh, right? Having another option for water resist down with defensive R abilities that actually help you against Ramuh, this is a great option, and one that you get just from fighting Leviathan, right? So this is a great option to have in terms of just, you know, available weapons to use, and just, you know, it's a nice flexible build, right? Nice flexible build. And so now what I want to do is I want to take a moment to pause the actual like individual builds video here, because we do have a couple more left, but I want to go into quickly the magic builds that you would build for each element, right? And I want to go over why I view the Lightning's Rod a little lower than maybe other folks might. And so first thing I want to talk about is Magic Fire. For Magic Fire, Matt has been the bread and butter for this team because of Luminary Sword. This increases your entire team's magic attack and fire potency, which is really, really strong. And as of today, Aerith does not currently have the ability to do that, right? She does not have the ability to increase your team's fire DPS. And as a result, between Tifa and now Sephiroth, who actually lowers fire resistance by himself, and with his offhand weapon being the Protector's Blade, which lowers magic defense, you're able to get a magic defense debuff and your fire resist down from just your another attacker roll, which is obviously very good. Tifa would be your primary DPS here, who then reapplies your buffs, getting that buff up to a higher tier, while also dealing really solid fire damage. Obviously, if you've got Sephiroth's fire DPS at a good level, you can also bring in Sephiroth here. And Sephiroth is the preferred between the two if you have his Shiranui at a high overboost level, because it does more damage, but also because his Kikuchi Manji has that same magic damage effect, giving your entire team even more magic DPS, which is obviously very, 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 very good. This is also very flexible for Matt as well. Like we talked about before with healers, you can kind of change this to whatever you need. So if you do, as an example, need a magic defense decrease, you can equip the Stingray, and this will give you a more not Sephiroth focused magic defense debuff, and you still have a high magic defense debuff. Because remember, he only really has to cast this attack once, and then Tifa can sit there and just buff it up herself, right? You have a lot of options here. There's a lot of ways to play around it. The Army of One limit break also enables you a lot more in those fights. And ultimately, the difference between Aerith giving you that 30% buff from Lightning's Rod, if you get it to OB10, which is required, by the way, in order to get it that high, or giving yourself a 10% for each tier of fire damage increase damage up, right? The difference between those two is they're exactly the same, right? Essentially, right? Because as a community, we have agreed that a magic attack buff, a fire potency buff, that's a 10% increase, right? Typically. So with the Luminary Sword at OB6, you're increasing your entire team's fire DPS by 10% for each tier, and then Tifa actually increases that by another 10% by getting it to extra high, right? So with that in mind, that is technically more DPS in that stage than what Aerith can currently provide, right? Now, will Aerith get a fire potency up effect? Maybe, right? Will Matt get a magic attack potency effect? Perhaps, right? We don't know. We don't know. But for now, this is usually what we're building out our fire teams to be. Magic Ice is where you really start to see the weapon shine, because she's able to utilize this Citric Wand and then the Lightning Stat or Lightning's Rod to give yourself that extra magic potency, because Tifa already has Exploit Weakness available and Ice Resist down in her primary magic ice damage build. It does require this to really see that level of like efficiency rise. Otherwise, you're probably using someone like Yuffie to either decrease the enemy's ice resistance or give your entire team Exploit Weakness, which right now, the only reason why this works is because Cloud and Tifa rather both have ways that are effective ways of increasing and giving themselves Exploit Weakness, right? Which then allows Aerith to have this Lightning's Rod as an offhand weapon efficiently, right? because at this point, if you do need a heal all slot, you would just switch these around, much like we talked about with her ice support and her featured build. This is where you would see that if you need the cure all slot, you would just move this up, because the lightning's rod does have a cure all materia slot, which is obviously required. Otherwise that weapon would probably not be nearly as good. But this is the one build where I think it is very efficient, but it does require you to probably have Tifa's ice weapon at a decent overboost level before you really start to see that effectiveness on your teams. Magic Wind, Red 13 is actually usually the healer for this one. The reason why is because his Brilliant Collar gives your entire team magic attack and wind potency. This is the same thing as Matt's. The difference is, instead of this being low to high, this actually goes mid to high once you get to OB6, meaning that you only need to do 2 casts to get your magic attack and your wind potency maxed out, which is solid. Again, Tifa can also increase this, but Tifa is not typically a magic wind damage dealer. The reason why it works out really well for this team as well is because Yuffie is one of the Wind DPS characters that you bring on the stage, and her Holiday Bell does a magic at defense and wind resist debuff on its own, right? So she can actually continue to deal DPS and keep that wind resist and magic defense down, while she's able to also give your entire team exploit weakness. Cloud then can focus in on DPS, while Red 13 is then focused on increasing your team's magic attack, increasing wind potency, and then his sub-weapon slot, or his offhand weapon, has a lot of flexibility. You can bring Canyon Collar for an AoE magic defense and wind attack. You can bring in Silver Collar for a more consistent wind resist down weapon. You can bring in Pilot's Collar for a heal if you wanted to have a more effective healing effect. There's a lot of options here that you can bring in with Red 13, making him a much better option in general for the wind magic teams. Moving on to Magic Water. This is another one where Aerith actually has some trouble, and we'll talk about her water build in a second. But the team leader's Bamboo Sword increases your entire team's water damage, which is pretty necessary for the water DPS on Aerith, because she's currently the only character in the game that can increase your entire team's water damage. So having that with the Crimson Staff, which is basically a staple on most magic damage teams, is pretty important. Obviously, if you're using Sephiroth Osafune, this does give you the magic attack increase, so then you would really only need a magic defense debuff. But since you're using Sephiroth, you can just use Kikuchi Manji and let Aerith be the one that does the magic defense debuff, right? There's no reason why this isn't good. This gives Sephiroth a haste. It does really solid damage. It does physical and magic damage bonus, which means it helps your summons do even more damage, because remember, your summons, right, are dealing, I don't know if this actually works with summons or not, but regardless, this does both, right? So this is actually more effective for building out your roster construction, right? Because Sephiroth Original will get more banners as we continue to play the game, as will Aerith, right? But they will focus in on this character. They know that this character is one that people love, and you will see more support for Sephiroth down the road. And then in terms of the last character slot here, it's usually, for me, it's probably the Angeal, just because he's got that AoE water resist down with this Mithril Slasher, and he also has the ability with Inflatable Buster Sword to inflict water weakness on the enemy, meaning that even if, as long as they're not resistant to water, he's actually able to then make them weak to water and decrease all of their water resistance at the same time, while dealing a really solid magic water damage attack, right? So I'd actually like to have Angeal on this team. Angeal then has the ability with his ultimate weapon to increase your physical defense, and it looks like it also increases magic defense as well, which is solid, right? This is a really good ultimate weapon to have for Angeal, and it's just the exchange ultimate weapon. And then you would bring in Ad Astra, which gives him your entire team a 25% fail with Provoke, right? So even on this water team, Aerith's probably not bringing that effect, right? And then you get to Magic Earth, and this is the other one where I think it's probably pretty useful. The reason why is because Angeal is able to give you that, I put this as a placeholder for his for his new weapon, but I think it's called the Ghost Ensis. That sword that you're able to use is a magic earth weapon that lowers earth resistance and increases your entire team's earth damage, which is really solid, giving you a really good debuff effect and a really good buff effect for your entire team. And then you can offhand pretty much whatever you need at that point with Angeal. I threw on Lightning Sword just because it lowers physical attack and increases physical defense. This is really good, by the way, for folks that have not gotten this yet. Make sure you get this to OB10 from the Final Fantasy 13 event. And then as you go through the options here, he's got a lot of options that you can throw on here. You can throw on Gargantuan Monolith for a better Provoke and a magic defense increase. You can throw on whatever you need, right? You can throw on Type 90 Longsword for a physical defense Provoke option. You can also do the Type 91 two-hander for a debuffing option. This does magic and physical attack debuff, and a Diamond Sigil Break, which is really good. Angeal's just got a really good featured kit that you can kind of play around. Whatever you need to make it work, you can make it work. And then Yuffie's the primary earth damage dealer here, so she's also able to bring your entire team exploit weakness, which means you don't need exploit weakness on Aerith, which then opens up Aerith to just bring in the Crimson Staff for magic attack up and magic defense down, and then you can then use the Lightning's Rod to then increase your entire team's magic attack by an additional 20 to 30% based on overboost level. This is another build where I think it's pretty efficient for you to utilize it in, but then from my perspective, you're looking at 2 builds as of today's recording that you can actually utilize this in. We'll go over Magic Lightning as well, which again is Red 13. But these are 2 builds where you're primarily using Aerith as the healer, and in those stages, she can use Lightning's Rod to a really effective level, right? So it does increase your magic ice ceiling and it does increase your magic earth ceiling. The only issue that I have with it, and the reason why I think OB0 is just fine, is both of those elements have just received new options in the featured pool within the last 6 months that have already increased their ceilings to really high levels, right? And Angeal's featured weapon is a great example of that, where it's increased that level by a ton. Yuffie's limited weapon that released during the Advent Children event increased the earth ceiling by a really wide margin, right, for Magic Earth. And then the Magic Ice, we've got a banner going out right now that really increases the ceiling for Magic Ice. But Full Throttle and Rocker's Guitar, the 2 ice weapons that we just received for Cloud and Yuffie, also raised the Magic Ice ceiling by quite a bit because of the effects and the abilities that those 2 weapons are able to have. So these weapons have increased the ceilings for those specific elements by quite a margin already, and Aerith doesn't quite fit into the other elements as well, and the ones that she does, like Magic Water, you're competing with other effects that are really solid and what are generally, not always, but generally better options, because they do things like the water damage that you're looking for while also giving your entire team a water damage buff. And that water damage buff is, again, another 20% damage that you would not otherwise have on that Magic Water build, right? So it's just food for thought. When it comes to the Lightning team, I'll go over this briefly because this doesn't include Aerith either. But Red 13's Pirate Collar has essentially made him the primary lightning damage magic support and magic healer, right? Because not only does this give you a 54% heal, it increases your magic attack, it increases your lightning damage, and it also has the ATP effect that Bahamut Rod has, while also having an Asuna All-Slot. This is one of, if not the best weapon in the game in terms of a healer weapon, and to not have Red 13 on your lightning teams is you're doing a disservice to your lightning damage builds at that point, right? Because he also has a lot of support in lightning. He's got the Seaside Collar for lightning resist down. He also got the Great Saber Cat Collar during the Dragon Quest event. That is an AoE magic lightning attack that does a physical and magic defense debuff, which is great for your summons, right? It's really, really solid. So a couple of great options for lightning damage based and lightning resist based stages, while also having awesome limit breaks with Stardust Raid, removing physical attack and magic attack up, and giving himself a amp healing ability, meaning that you can get a 30% buff to your next heal, getting your team back on their feet while not having to focus in on the heal stat, right? So that's something that's also really effective. In terms of the other supports for this, you're usually bringing in somebody like a Sephiroth for AoE lightning damage. You're bringing in Vincent or Tifa for single target magic lightning damage, and then you just kind of go around the build like that. But yeah, it's hard to replace Red 13 at this point in the magic lightning damage builds. So what I'm saying now is that when I go back to the actual builds here, and I'm talking about Aerith in particular, the reason why I don't value the Lightning's Rod so high is because she just has so many good limited weapons. Now, if you don't have those limited weapons, the item's great, right? It's great. Is it superb? Is it a must pull? Do you need to get to OB6? I still don't think so. And the reason why is because Crimson Staff is in that limit break pool. You were able to get it during the exchange shop, which if you watched my videos back then during the Trial of the Summons videos, that I recommended pulling for Crimson Staff and only Crimson Staff, because that weapon at OB0 gives your magic damage teams such an insane amount of power that you would not be able to get otherwise. And so like I hope you were able to get at least one copy of that. But even just with that one copy, it's very rare that you're going to find yourself not having a healing weapon in the offhand, not having a debuffing weapon in the offhand, not having it. You understand what I'm saying? There are way too many other options for Aerith. And even if you do have Crimson Staff at OB0 and you don't have the Dragon Quest weapon and you don't have Terror Rod and you don't have Kimura Wand and you don't have Bahamut, right, etc., and you think that that's a good weapon to have in the offhand, it is good, right? It is good. But on most of the teams, as I just showed you, it is not the preferred option, right? And so that's why I found it a little less optimal overall. Will that change with Aerith over time? Absolutely. Will that change with the other healers over time? More than likely, right? Aerith is one of the most supported characters in the game in terms of overall weapons. She obviously has a ton of weapons that you can use and choose from. So Aerith has a lot more flexibility and will continue to get more banner support as we continue down the road, just because Aerith is a fan favorite and that's just how it works. That's how gacha games work. But that's why I'm a little down on the Lightning's Rod. I don't think that it's a bad weapon. I do think that there are some builds where it's actually the best option, but it's only 2 of 12 possible builds if you're looking at it very like narrow-mindedly, right? Because obviously, like I've said before, every single stage has its ebbs and flows, what you're going to need for those stages, what's efficient, what's needed, right? It's all going to change. And the reason why it works really well right now is because the ice build with Tifa's weapon is really, really good at opening up other weapon slots, right? Because it's able to do 2 things that your team needs, ice resist down and exploit weakness, that allows your other characters to open up their weapon slots. Until we see that strength added to the rest of the game, this is usually what you're looking at when it comes to the actual magic support build. Moving right along, we're gonna go right into the ice support and water support builds. This is the limited ice support. So we're talking about the one that we were just talking about just a few minutes ago, where the limited ice support is going to use the Lightning's Rod and the Citric Wand. Citric Wand increases your individual's ice damage, and then this would give you a magic attack bonus, which is a 30% increase to your DPS, while your magic attack is being increased from your Citric Wand. Depending on the stage, if you need the heal, you'll use Breath of the Earth. If you don't need a heal and time is not an a barrier, Army of One is going to be the standard here with a 475 charge speed, and this isn't even fully unlocked, by the way. But I think that's probably, I don't think charge speed is on the rest of the nodes. I think it's just potency. So I think that's probably correct. But a 475 charge speed is very easy to get, and this will help top off your team's physical and magic attack, and then takes care of the fact that you don't have a good AoE magic attack buff, allowing you then to buff the rest of your team. The reason why it works really well for Ice is because Cloud's full throttle weapon increases his own magic attack, meaning he is self-sufficient at increasing his magic attack. So the only person who needs a magic attack buff on that team is Tifa, right? So that's why it's really good. If you need the heal, bring Breath of the Earth. If you need the damage, bring Army of One. In terms of the sub-weapons or the materia slots, again, this is just going to be mostly just defensive and healing stat sticks for whatever we need available. Sub-weapons would be magic attack all allies and attack all allies, and buff debuff extension, which is why I've got Crimson Staff on for buff debuff extension, and then Rocket Lance for, again, buff debuff extension. This is still a really, really good build. This is obviously very, very strong, and if you do have the Lightning's, the Guardian Core outfit for Aerith, that's going to give her a 35% increase to her healing potency, meaning that that AoE cure, even though it's got a 40% reduction from that AoE cure slot, getting a 35% to your healing potency gives you 35% more healing potency. So really it ends up being like a 5% difference for what you would otherwise see without any healing potency added on the outfit. So really, really good. Obviously, it's very, very strong. It's a really strong build for specifically Magic Ice. And if you've got those other limited weapon options, meaning Tifa's Lightning Gloves, Tifa's Leather Combat Gloves, and then Cloud's Fusion Sword, it becomes incredibly strong, if not incredibly expensive, right? And so if you don't have those options available, it becomes a little less optimal, and it's just not as good. In most cases, you'll probably be looking for things like the Crimson Staff to decrease the enemy's magic defense. But with Cloud on the team and full throttle available, it is possible to get to bench Crimson Staff, and this is the one situation where it's actually pretty good. And then finally, we've got the water support build. This one is a pretty cut and dry one as well. We're using Crimson Staff for the AoE magic attack buff. Then we're using the team leader's Bamboo Sword for AoE water damage, while also giving your entire team a water damage buff. Now, at OB10, this does go from mid to mid to high, which is really strong, and the damage actually increases by quite a bit as well. Not only does it go from 460 to 530% in area of effect, but it gets a 40% buff when you have a buff included on yourself, right? So as long as you use Crimson Staff first, giving yourself that magic attack buff, then you're going to see that damage skyrocket from 530% all the way up to 742%, which is one of the strongest AoE elemental weapons in the game, right? Remember that I mentioned before, the AoE elemental weapons, the strongest that we've seen is like 804. So 740% while giving your entire team a water damage buff is massive. That's a lot of damage at OB10. It's still a decent amount of damage at OB6. And obviously the damage is a tiny bit lower with the medium increase instead of the high, but it's still really solid, still really good. I'm giving her more offensively focused materials here. These are both magic attack substicks. And then just a cure for the cure all slot. I'm giving her the tidal flare because I do have her outfit that gives that extra water damage bonus. So she's able to utilize that water damage DPS a little bit better. And on the build that I had, remember that Angeal was my water resist down user, and he didn't have an Arcanum in that case. So he's not going to utilize that water damage up effect as well as someone like Aerith does when she's got some extra water potency and magic attack sitting on her offhand. So food for thought, it really depends on which one has more water potency. If Angeal's got more water potency because you're using both his Mithril Slasher and his Inflatable Buster Sword, and you're giving him a bit more of a DPS role, make him carry that instead and give Aerith Breath of the Earth instead. And then obviously again for sub-weapons, magic attack all allies. I gave her heal as well to increase that healing potency, and then some buff debuff extension. And that's pretty much it. I say that's it. And again, remember that I mentioned that this is a very nuanced character. This is a very nuanced build. And every time you have a healer or a support or a tank on your team, your weapons and what you choose to bring to those stages is going to completely depend on what you're facing. So even though this is meant to help guide you and help you understand how to build Aerith in general, most of the guides that you're going to see that will be the most helpful for you with specific stages will be specific stage guides versus character guides. Aerith is still a really good character if you have her invested in those limited pools. If you do not have her limited weapons and all of those limited options, specifically speaking to things like Bahamut Rod, Kimura Wand, less so Kimura Wand nowadays, but Bahamut Rod and Crimson Staff specifically, and in some cases the Riot Blade, the Terra's Rod from Final Fantasy VI's crossover, those three weapons in particular make Aerith a much more useful healer in this game than her featured pool ever could, right? And so if you don't have those options available, Matt and Red 13, you'll find are typically more useful as a healer on most stages, just because their featured pool is so helpful. Red 13 has the ability to debuff the enemies, imperil the enemy's fire resistances for 5 of the 6 elements. Currently, the only one he can't imperil is Earth. And on that stage where you need the Earth resist down, a tank in Angeal is actually able to then give you that Earth resist down with his new weapon. So there are other options in the game that are really good and have featured weapon options that don't require you to invest heavily into limited banners. So arguably, if you haven't pulled on Aerith in the past, or if you've started playing in the last couple months, Aerith is probably the lowest priority of all the healers, just because again her featured pool is just not that strong. But that is a difficult thing to say because, like I said earlier, she will continue to get a ton of support over time because people love Aerith, right? And that will not change. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you like the video, comment, and subscribe. I will have videos coming out about Matt, Lucia, and Angeal coming in the next couple of days, so I hope you all are looking forward to that. I do have to obviously set up all of these little teams and all the little builds and stuff so you guys can see all of it. And then once I have those ready, I'll record, explain everything, and we'll go from there. If you're ever interested in checking us out live, we do update nights every single week on Wednesday night at the update night time. As it stands today, we just ended daylight savings time here in the States. So now it is at 9 p.m. Eastern or 6 p.m. Pacific. So if you're interested in checking us out live, make sure you come check us out over on Twitch or on TikTok, because we'll be dual streaming both on Twitch and TikTok. If that's not your cup of tea, make sure you subscribe here, because I always include most of my thoughts that I get from the stream. I usually edit them down and post them here on YouTube, or I give you guides like we're doing today. But I appreciate y'all watching. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. And as always, we'll see you again in the next one. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.